idea that they don't have enough sophisticated equipment is just simply not accurate. They have every equipment, every piece of equipment that makes rational sense based on our military and NATO's military for them to be able to do what they're doing. And they're wreaking havoc on the Russian military.
Well, that's President Biden just a few minutes ago talking to the Business Roundtable here in Washington, D.C., saying Ukraine essentially has the sophisticated weaponry it needs, as there is a stalemate on the ground. Let's bring in our panel. Fox News senior political analyst Britt Hume, Katie Pavlich, news editor at townhall.com, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Britt, what about what the president's saying there, as there are calls for more help into the Ukrainians?
Well, I think most people in the West would hope that that's true, but I think it will also seem to a lot of people that the people who know best what they need are the Ukrainians who are actually fighting the war instead of the heads of other states who are not. So I think it raises a question of whether what we're doing is sufficient. I think, a lot of people give Biden credit for what he's done. NATO has rallied, and I think he's played a big part in that. And NATO rallying has important role to play in the world we see after the Ukraine fight is over, as well as now. But I think it ought to be up to the Ukrainians probably to figure out what they need. And this technicality they're using about sending, for example, the MiGs, that they're labeled an offensive weapon, whereas other things are defensive. Well, look, if you're fighting over your own skies to protect your country, you're fighting on defense. And I think the distinction doesn't really make any sense. So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah. Meantime, President Biden heads to Europe, is heading to Poland. He's heading to NATO headquarters. Wall Street Journal has this. Russia is failing to achieve early victory in Ukraine, is seen as shifting to Plan B. Senior U.S. officials see signs the Kremlin is shifting to a new strategy to secure key territorial objectives while seeking leverage to compel the Ukrainian government to accept neutrality between Russia and the West. Leslie, what do you think the goal is for President Biden as he heads to NATO and to Poland?
Well, I think in addition to further unification, to be clear, not just in what Ukraine needs, but what the Western world needs to do, because, military experts have said, even though President Zelensky is, in a sense, begged for a no-fly zone, we are not alone. Our allies do agree that that would be entering possibly World War III. Vladimir Putin, we see, is losing, and he is desperate, and there is a concern if he would use nuclear weapons. There is no-fly zone light. We would have to shoot down Russian aircraft, military experts say. There is also no nuclear war light or nuclear arsenal weapon that's going to be used from Russia that could be light. So this is a very dangerous territory we could see ourselves in with Vladimir Putin, and I think that's what the president's going to talk about. And additionally, prior to March 17th, I think people could question what the president said that you had asked Britt about, but 800 million, when you look at these drones that can up to 50 miles away take out Russian tanks, you have non-tank ability, you have Stryker and Javelin missiles. I am trusting what the president says along with our allies as to what we're providing for the president and the military and the people of Ukraine.
The question now, Katie, is what is Putin's goal? Has it shifted? Is there a settlement in the works here? President Zelensky, Ukrainian president, said that there will be a referendum on any deal with Russia. Not sure how that works. If you can't get to the store, how do you get to the voting booth? But that's what he said today. What do you think, Katie?
Well, President Zelensky has repeatedly asked for a one-on-one meeting with President Putin. There's been back and forth on whether that will happen. President Zelensky has said repeatedly that Ukraine will not give up, that they will not, they will not surrender to the assault that has been inflicted on their country. And I think the question for the United States, as President Biden goes to Poland, is first how they handle this refugee crisis, which does impact the NATO countries. Of course, Poland has taken in millions of refugees, with more on the way. But the other is what the mission is in Ukraine with arming the Ukrainians. The Russians have been in Syria for 6 years. Is the goal of the United States and NATO of arming Ukrainians with what they say is less than they actually need to beat Russia? Is our goal to beat Russia, or is it to simply manage this back and forth fight? You mentioned the Russians setting up minefields. I don't think that Vladimir Putin is interested in a short war here, and he's a very patient man. And this is just the beginning of what we've gotten run into. The other question that we have now is what the White House said today, is that the president warned that the United States could come under a cyber attack from Russia. And if you look at what NATO has said recently about what that would mean for Article 5, they say a cyber attack significant enough could trigger Article 5. And so we're not just in the situation of just Ukraine, we're also in the situation of how NATO would handle an attack that the president warned about today.
And that likely is going to be a conversation at NATO headquarters. Britt, the Associated Press about China saying a U.S. admiral saying it's fully militarized the South China Sea. China has fully militarized at least 3 of several islands it built in the disputed South China Sea, arming them with anti-ship, anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, and fighter jets. As we try to determine what exactly China's role is going to be with Russia, it's doing its own militarization in a very open area.
Yeah, it is, and I think, a lot of strategists, I think, correctly believe that China is the greater long-term threat to the security of the United States, particularly as regards Taiwan, which is the source of a great deal of the chips and other technological equipment that is needed for our high-tech sector, which is vital to our economy, much more vital than anything, for example, that Ukraine would offer. So I think, that is the big, larger question. And one can only hope that Xi Jinping looks at what's happening to Putin with the bloody nose that Putin has gotten in Ukraine and thinks, my God, is this the kind of thing that could happen to us? I mean, if we attacked Taiwan and tried to simply absorb it, if Taiwan would fight, and Taiwan has a lot of fighting equipment and the will to fight. So let's hope that that Xi Jinping takes that lesson from what's happening with Putin in Russia and not some other lesson.
There's also the lesson of Iran, Leslie. The Iran Supreme Leader is still on Twitter. Our former president is not on Twitter, but the Iran Supreme Leader is on Twitter and tweeted out one of the sweetest events in 1400 AH was the Americans admitting they suffered a humiliating defeat in their maximum pressure policy against Iran. Other events took place in the world, too, all of which showed the correctness of the path of the Iranian people against arrogance. This tweet, as the U.S. gets ready to sign a deal that many experts are saying, Leslie, could be less than the deal in 2015, the Iran nuclear deal.
And that's why I think you see pushback from both sides of the aisle on this, Democrats and Republicans. Their concerns not only will they get less from 2015 during the Obama administration, they're also concerned of the timing. Is now the time to do this, especially because any kind of a deal that would be struck now, and I'm in agreement with those people who are critical of this on the left, on my fellow Democrat side, because you could, in a sense, facilitate, millions or even billions of dollars that Vladimir Putin would have access to, doing business with Iran, nuclear business with Iran with this new deal. So I don't think this is the time to be revisiting this, and I know some of my fellow Democrats agree with me on that.
All right, panel, thank you so much. We have all week to talk about the confirmation hearings. Went off well today, according to both sides of the aisle. For Ketanji Brown Jackson, thank you very much.